5 minutes past 10. David Whiting, our talkback lawyer, is here to take your calls. Free legal advice just by punching these numbers into your phone. 1300 222 774. 1300 222 774. I nearly said dial the number, but of course no one does that anymore. The Dow Jones has dropped 4.5% by close. 4.5%. So the Australian share market falling sharply. That's the worst one-day points fall on Wall Street for, well, a very long time. So we will keep abreast of what's going on at the stock exchange. We'll get to Marcus Padley after David Whiting has told us what's going on in the legal system. 1300 222 774. And David, good morning to you.
Good morning, John. You're assuming I know what's going on. That's clearly a failing.
No, I absolutely know that I know that you know everything that's going on. That's why we have you here.
Oh, right, okay.
Nothing escapes.
The delusion has worked for quite some time.
Nothing escapes your scrutiny. Absolutely nothing. So it sort of occurred to me, apropos of the Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Robert Doyle, through his lawyer at one of Melbourne's biggest law firms and his PR agency, said that it was the view of the Lord Mayor that he was not getting the benefit of natural justice. If you were advising Robert Doyle and he said to you, oh, look, this isn't fair, your remedy is to walk across the road to the Supreme Court and go and see a judge and say this has been conducted unfairly, we're being denied natural justice. And if indeed you can prove that, you would immediately get an injunction.
Yes, absolutely.
You get an injunction against Dr. Freckleton QC and the City of Melbourne to stop the process and force it to be done in a way that is fair.
I agree with you, John, but
just to develop the idea, the fact that that's not happened, but they've said that they regard it as being conducted in a way that denies them natural justice, it's in a way defamatory of those who are conducting the inquiry.
Yes.
And if Dr. Freckleton was so minded, Dr. Freckleton could proceed for defamation, for it is being alleged by Mr. Doyle that he's conducting the inquiry in a way that is a complete contradiction of his professional skills and standing.
And that puts the onus on Robert Doyle to prove the lack of natural justice. Now, natural justice in a legal sense means procedural fairness, that we've followed the right steps, we've done it the right way.
You've been given a chance to be heard, to know the evidence against you and respond to it.
And I haven't read any suggestion anywhere other than as a result of that announcement that, in fact, Dr. Freckleton has done anything wrong at all in the way that he's conducted his investigation. I'm not aware that he's made any press releases. I'm not aware that there are any leaks from his corner of the triangle, but what I have seen is an extraordinary amount of material that would appear to have come from the Lord Mayor's camp. There was an article there was a release in the Herald Sun which ran 2 or 3 pages of extraordinary information. That 2 days later the Age reported they'd been offered the same packet of information from Mr. Doyle's corner. It's a question of, there's this issue, John, and I don't know how you resolve it, in that if you make an accusation of this kind, you generally identify the perpetrator or the person you believe to be the perpetrator, and you generally don't identify the person who makes the accusation. In this case, we have identified 2 people who have made detailed accusations.
All sorts of stuff's gone wrong.
And so there's also, the question is, how much of it do you run in the newspaper?
So when people agree to private mediation or arbitration or even the investigation of a matter, one of the first things that's usually done is everyone signs up to the same set of agreed principles, number 1 of which is that this remains confidential amongst the parties.
But John, this is not one of those.
Why not? Why was it not done this way?
Because it was not this is a question that the City of Melbourne receives a complaint about the Lord Mayor from one of its councillors.
Yes.
The council has an obligation to provide a safe workplace. The council has a series of obligations under its own legislation and under the Local Government Act. And so you walk in, you make a complaint, and what the City of Melbourne needs to do is say, well, what do we now do? Do we prosecute on the basis of the statement? Do we refer to the minister? What do we do next? And that's the investigation that Ian Freckleton has been undertaking.
Yes. So
that the council's position moving forward, another glib phrase, is they know what they now do next. So
Sure.
someone goes, it could be a council officer, it could be anyone who does it, and they've simply chosen a QC to do it. That person then reports to council and says, well, this is the view I've formed on the information that I've got.
Talking to all the witnesses, checking the documents whenever they're available.
Talking to all the witnesses who choose to talk to me.
Yeah, sure, you can't
Okay.
compel people.
No.
It's not that sort of a forum.
And then, because it's a decision of council, it's not a decision of the CEO, it's not council needs to make a decision. You then need to go to the governing body of council and say, well, that's what I've got. There's my preliminary report.
Sure, but
what should we do about it?
The fact that stuff's leaking left, right and centre and from different people for different reasons shows what is one of the primary concerns here, which is the lack of the integrity, not of the fairness, but the integrity of the process. If people feel free to try to circumvent it or manipulate it, it's already losing some of its credibility.
No, I don't. In a funny way, John, I think that Town Hall and the investigator are doing their jobs remarkably well.
I think they're trying to, yes.
It's all the stuff that's going on around it, whether you call it press releases or a need to meet a deadline or you play with a story that's live, whatever it is,
it's just plain leaks. People who feel they're on the wrong side of the outcome are trying to undo it.
Yep. I don't know they're going to succeed, John.
Time will tell, maybe even in the next day or two.
My thoughts were when the exclusive was released to the Herald Sun on Friday about the resignation, because they put it in their paper as a exclusive resignation. What now happens?
The Herald Sun were notified of Mr. Doyle's intention to resign before the council were notified.
Yes.
I mean, that's just so wrong. It's hard to know quite what to do about that.
Well, not a lot, really. There's not much you can do about it because it's not a compulsory process. It
shows you the mindset that is characterising this entire episode.
Yes,
which is media first, proper process second.
Yep. And then you complain about the inadequacies of the proper process in circumstances where you're trying to you're running an argument in the court of public opinion.
Well, then complaining that you've been subjected to trial by media is somewhat unconvincing and disingenuous.
When you wonder how many of the column inches are yours.
Other things.
John, you will recall that Jeffrey Rush was accused of inappropriate behaviour while acting at the Sydney Theatre Company.
And sued for defamation.
And on Thursday night, the publisher of the Sydney Telegraph filed their defence. And on Monday, yesterday, the lawyers acting for Jeffrey Rush have issued an application in the New South Wales Supreme Court to strike out part of the defence.
And to suppress it.
And to suppress the whole of the defence.
On the basis that by publishing the defence, they're getting through the back door what they ought not to have got through the front.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you do is you say, fine, if you're going to sue us for defamation, this is the Murdoch media response, if you're going to sue us for defamation, everything we've got we're going to publish in our pleadings in the court, and then they can all be published, and we'll get you that way. It's dirty, dirty Paul.
Yes. Well, only the government's supposed to be a model litigant, John. and sometimes they fail. Now, the one of the things that's also arisen recently is the legislation that the federal government is putting forward in relation to the disclosure of classified information that they put forward as enhancing the security of the nation. But one of the things that it includes is the position that a journalist in possession of classified information commits an offence. Any person, including a journalist, in possession of classified information commits an offence. And the difficulty that I have with that is that there have been extraordinary enhancements in the quality of our democracy by information distributed by whistleblowers. What happens to that? Don't know.
These are vexed questions to which we need to workshop the answers in undoubtedly the event that it all happens again one day.
And the last thing, John, is that if you commit an offence, should you not only pay a fine, should you also pay a tax? There's the suggestion overnight that if you commit a criminal offence, then you ought to contribute to the cost of remediation for those people who suffer criminal offences.
So there is a Victims of Crime Assistance Fund, and it pays for counselling and whatever else is a direct consequence.
Broken teeth and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and that's funded out of general revenue. The suggestion is that you could impose a levy on everyone going through the courts who's convicted.
Yes.
To top up that fund and that way have more money, and everyone seems to have picked up on this. It's suggested to the Law Reform Commission by the former Police Association Secretary, now Victims of Crime Commissioner.
Yes.
And Mr Davies has come up with a model based on what's happening in other states, as the opposition leader was mentioning to us this morning. So...
Well, isn't it just a higher fine, John?
Yeah, but no, it's
We're just calling it something different.
It's part of... So you might be made to pay a fine of $5,000 plus $100 into the fund that pays for victims of crime.
Or if you're in the county or Supreme, $350.
Yeah, for more serious crimes.
Yeah.
And that's earmarked specifically. It doesn't go into general revenue. It goes specifically earmarked for that fund.
Yeah, I would have thought that you would set fines having regard in a broad sense to the cost to the community of what results. I'm saying no.
All right. Well,
thank you, John.
Let's wait and see. Adrian in Rosebud's first up with David Whiting. Morning, Adrian.
Yeah, good morning, John. Morning, David. Okay, my query is...
You spoke to John half an hour. You spoke to Adrian half an hour ago, John.
Yeah.
It's a very patient man, Adrian. Yep.
I am. I've been trying twice now, David. I tried last week, and I know the original query was on tourist visa, and the result was no recourse. So that's fine. But I'm thinking, I'm wanting to apply again, and I'll give you some background. My wife has a niece and a grandniece in Belarus that we wanted to bring out here for a holiday for 3 weeks. That was limited to 3 weeks because the young girl had just finished her medical exams and had to be back in Belarus to do her medical practicum.
What part of Belarus is she from, Adrian?
She's from Mogilov, but Minsk is the main part. She's from a place called Mogilov.
Okay, which is where my father's father's family came from at the turn of at the early 1900s.
Wonderful, John. Interestingly...
We might be related.
It could be, and this is what happened. My wife found this family that were lost in the war, in the Second World War. She's actually written a book which she sent to you, but I'm afraid it probably hasn't got past your producers. But the thing is...
I certainly have not seen a book of that kind. I just want to make that clear.
Can I tell you the name?
I'll put you back to my producers when we finish, but let's continue with David Whiting rather than my genealogy.
Yeah. So their visas were refused. They had to deal through Moscow because there's no embassy in Belarus. Mm-hmm. The visas were refused. 2 weeks before they were due to come here, they were limited to 3 weeks to be here because, as I said, the girl had to get back to do her medical practicum.
Can I ask, Adrian?
Yes.
Who do they leave behind? Who's in Belarus?
An extended family, grandfather.
The reason for rejection is most often because the department is concerned they won't return.
Yes, that's the quote is that they didn't provide an incentive. It doesn't provide incentive to return following their stay in Australia.
Yes.
Now, I just wondered how we could go about. They're wanting to come for a visit.
Yes.
My wife's...
Can I give you a silly suggestion, Adrian?
Yes, go ahead.
Bring them one at a time.
Oh.
Right, because part of the issue is so it's, do they own property? Do they have stable jobs? All of those things form part of the assessment made by the department about whether they are likely to return or not.
Can we do... We were doing it off our own bat here. Can we post a bond? Can we... my wife sent a letter explaining the whole situation because originally the documentation is very
they're amazing forms, aren't they, Adrian?
All forms, and we had to send them, or we sent them. Part of the details was the fact that we owned property here in Australia, our rates notes, which I thought was an imposition on privacy. But anyway, we sent that to them so that they had that. But I wondered if...
But there's two parts to this. How will they be looked after when they're here? And the answer is okay. No. Yep. From the department's point of view, 2 bits.
Yes.
How will they be looked after when they're here? Because my guess is they won't have a lot of money.
No.
Right? So, and you've answered that by saying, I've got this money in the bank, I own this property, I am I'm accepting responsibility for care for them while they're here.
Yes.
And I'm happy to pay their airfare and I'm doing all that stuff. The second part is, how do I prove that they are going back? And that's why I suggested if you split the visit into two so they come separately rather than together, then there's a very good argument that in fact the likelihood of returning is significant. That would be, I would suggest, the easiest way to overcome the hurdle. I don't know, extended family helps you. Jobs in Belarus, property owned in Belarus, assets in Belarus are all part of the process. And if you've got mother and daughter and you bring daughter and leave mother, then again you've enhanced the prospect of the daughter returning, or bring mother, take mother, and then mother goes home and daughter comes out. Both make the exercise more likely to succeed. All right?
Good luck with that, Adrian. I hope that helps. And I'll just pop you back to my producers so that I can follow up on the other issue. Peter in Mount Eliza. Morning, Peter.
Yes, David, I've got a query. If a letterbox has no junk mail sign on it and you put junk mail in it, does that break the law? And would political advertising be considered junk mail?
Only if it's not your party, Peter. All right? Otherwise, you're preaching to the converted.
But if you don't want any of it, is Peter's point.
There are regulations that govern what can and can't be put in the mail. Stuff that is individually addressed is not considered to be junk mail. And I think you might find that there's also an exemption for political parties. But I'll give you a better answer next week as to what is and isn't junk mail. And I suppose there's also a difference between what Australia Post puts in, because they have regulations about what they'll accept and how they'll deliver it, and what someone who is simply walking down the street stuffing handbills in your letterbox might
I'm not
do.
quite sure what the point of the question is, though, Peter, because even if it is against the law, it's not like you're not about to go off and sue the people who put things in your letterbox on the basis that you've suffered some damage from it. So,
Nor will you get the federal police to enforce the legislation either.
So even if it is technically, notionally, something that's contrary to a piece of law that someone somewhere enacted, well, so what? You can't do much about it. Just chuck it out. Isn't that the answer?
Is that the answer for you, Peter? Is for me. But I'll still give you the answer.
You're not about to rush off and try and get an injunction against some kid who's putting things in your letterbox. So what's the point, even if it is against the law, Peter? There's nothing you can do about it.
If somebody was to see me putting something in and they become...
Oh, you're one of the people who put stuff in the letterbox.
For every party, yes. But anyway, look, I'll look forward to next week, as I have...
over a long period of time. Good on you, and thank you. Lee and Dargo. Morning, Lee. How's beautiful Dargo?
Hello, David and John. I've got a bit of a long-winded one, but I'll try and make it really short. My father, 20 years ago, he died, and his new wife lived on the money and everything, and we just sort of didn't worry about that, and she had the house. And now she has died, but in the meantime, she had brought another man into the house.
Yes.
Now, my question is, in the will, it was written out that because I've got 3 other siblings, so there's 4 of us, that half of the house would go to my 4 family, and the other half would have gone to hers. But in the meantime, her daughter has died. And this new man has got a daughter.
Okay, Lee.
So can we fight that she can get a 5th? We don't want to say, well, no, you're not going to have any, but...
Lee, I haven't got your will in front of me.
Right.
Presumably, half the property was given directly to the wife, and the other...
No, the whole thing was when he...
So he gave her a life interest, is that right?
That the house will go to us children.
Sorry, when you say us children, you mean the children of your father?
Yes.
As well as the children of your stepmother?
Yes, as well as my stepmother's daughter, but she died. But the new boyfriend had a daughter, and they're sort of thinking that she's going to get the other daughter's half.
Well, it all depends on precisely what the will says, and the question is, what's the class of beneficiaries? My thoughts are that it all goes to the 4 of you.
Yeah.
But it really depends upon what the document says.
Which can only be resolved by someone who understands the nuances, reading the actual words of the document itself.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you need to go and get some legal advice, Lee.
Okay, all right, no worries.
And David, there are specialists in this area. Whoever happens to be the local lawyer at the shopping centre may not be the best person. You want to get someone who's done these sort of things before, don't you?
Someone who's been in practice, I would have thought, for a good period of time.
And specialising in wills and estates, Lee.
All right, thank you.
Good luck. Mary in Frankston. Hiya, Mary. You're through to David.
Oh, thanks very much, John. I'm ringing about a deceased estate holiday house that belonged to my parents. I'm one of 5 surviving children, and we've had this house between us, ever since then. One of my brothers is executor of the estate, but the title has never been transferred into our 5 names. So it's remained in the name of the estate of my parents.
So
I can see... Oh, sorry.
So is the property given to the 5 of you?
Yes.
Okay.
It was willed to us, but we're now in our late 60s and early 70s, and between us we've got 16 children, so I can see a bit of a mess ahead of us. We've asked our brother, who's the executor, to get some legal advice about what we should do, so I'm not sure...
What's the ultimate aim?
I feel that it probably should have been put into our 5 names as tenants in common.
On what you have told me, and without seeing the will, it would be possible for the property to be transmitted to your brother, which means that he would then hold it as the legal personal representative of your mother.
Okay.
And then he's able to transfer it to the 5 of you without the payment of duty. So I see it as a very simple and straightforward exercise to get the property from one name, the last of your parents to die, to your brother as executor.
They died together.
Well, that's quite weird. But the law says then if you can't work out what order they died in order of age.
Yes.
So what the law would say is the person who was older died first. Then
but nothing swings on that.
No.
What matters for Mary is with 5 elderly co-owners.
Yes.
Mature rather than elderly,
your
Mary.
Your concern, I anticipate, Mary, is what happens as this generation maybe starts to die.
Mary, that's even easier. You have a 1/5 interest in the house.
Right.
If you were to die, your children or whoever inherits under your will will inherit the 1/5 interest in the house.
So if one sibling has 1 child, they get a 5th share. If one sibling has 2 children, they get a 5th share between them.
Yes.
If one has 5 children, they get 1/5 of a 5th each, and so on. And you can keep going that way, Mary, if you don't want to sell the house.
Okay. But
if everyone agrees on how to look after it and maintain it and pay the bills.
Yes, that's a problem too.
Always is.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
There's no great difficulty in where you're at, but I do think you ought to move it to the 5 names.
Yes. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mary.
That's what I was thinking. Thanks very much, David. Bye.
No, good luck, and these are complicated issues. Cameron in Footerscray. Morning, Cameron.
Morning, and thank you for your time. I hope my nerves don't muck this up. Just before Christmas, I had a work vehicle stolen. It's a ute with a toolbox. Because insurance companies don't insure tools on utes, I got a really great toolbox that's very hard to break into.
Yes.
When the car was recovered, the police noted that they hadn't got into the toolbox. The toolbox was still locked. They damaged the box but had not got in.
Yep.
It was taken to the assessors, on which I went and met the assessors. They were going to write the ute off, but the toolbox was still locked. I said I'd need to get my tools out from the toolbox. The assessors then organised a locksmith to open the toolbox with them.
Yep.
When I returned, all my tools were gone. So they've been...
Sorry, you think they were there until the assessor arranged for the toolbox to be opened and then they were disappeared at that stage?
Yeah, because they hadn't been accessed. The box hadn't been opened by the thieves or anyone.
So you think they were still in there, but you don't actually know?
Well, that's what the insurance are telling me. They're saying, can you prove that your tools were in there? And I I can't prove that.
Cameron,
put them in
I
there.
can't prove it either. Only thing I would do is ask the insurance company if they have closed-circuit television in the areas where they do the assessing.
Yeah, I've had a police report from the first one saying that the car was, the toolbox was unopened.
Yeah,
I've now had to do another police report.
Yeah,
to go to
I
the
understand where
insurance.
you're at. You need to prove, if you want to make the allegation against the insurance company in a formal, whether you want to issue your own proceeding or complaint to the police, you're going to need to establish that at the time the vehicle was inspected by you, before the locksmith turned up, that the tools were inside. On the balance of probabilities that the tools were inside, that I see as nigh on impossible. But you and I both know that there are a large number of organisations who have closed-circuit television.
Yeah. Hey, Cameron, what's the total value of what you regard as having been stolen?
Well, about 2,500.
Okay, so the remedy available to Cameron if push comes to shove, David, for $2,500 worth of tools, is this a VCAT claim against the insurance company to compel them?
No, because it's an action for damages.
So it's in the magistrate's court?
It's a magistrate's court matter, and he would sue the insurance company and the assessors, but he's got the burden of proof, John. He needs to be able to prove that at the time the box was opened by the insurance assessors, it had $2,500 worth of tools in it. And I say, that's almost impossible.
I would have thought that they'd have to have had me as a witness to when they got the locksmith there to open the box.
That's a discussion that you might have had before they got the locksmith.
Yeah.
Look, we need to get a locksmith. Great, you go and do that, then I'll come back, is not a commitment to hold the locksmith until such time as you returned.
So, Cameron, one argument would be check your insurance contract. It might be that you can find a way for the insurance company to be liable regardless, whichever way, whoever
He still
stole
needs
them.
to prove they're there. That, I think, is the hard bit. At the time the vehicle turned up to be assessed, were there $2,500 worth of tools in the toolbox?
That's what they're saying. I have to prove that they were.
So it's not enough to prove that it was locked. We'll all accept that. They need to prove that they were put in there and then locked and then not opened. That's hard.
All right, Cameron.
Sorry, Cameron.
Thank you for your time.
Sorry, doesn't help you at all. David.
Thank you, John.
Thank you indeed. David Whiting, our talkback lawyer, helping us with free legal advice. Text message, David Whiting is like the Hugh Worth of legal talkback.
I'm cautious. Dr. Worth died. I'd rather not be as in his current state. Is that
I completely agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. David Whiting, our talkback lawyer.